This meeting is now being recorded.
Okay, so as a reminder, star 6 to mute and unmute yourselves. I'm going to leave you as unmuted so you can chime in as you need. If people start chatting or get chatty in the background, at some point I may mute you all. But for now, star 6 to mute yourself, star 6 to unmute yourself. Feel free at any time to chime in with questions, thoughts, suggestions, answers, all that good stuff. Today's agenda includes going through several pieces of feedback that we've received from you over the last year or so. Much of that was included in the contractor survey, satisfaction survey that you filled out in May or so, and then some proposed solutions from the team here at CBPAG for changes you may see in eCaST over the next coming months, because we really want to get your thoughts, opinions, ideas, solutions about whether we're moving in the right direction as we're considering these changes, what else we should be thinking about, what is more important than the things we thought we might change. So this is really an opportunity for us to share with you what we thought might be some solutions and for you to respond to that and then add to it as well. So first and foremost, thank you. I didn't want to forget to say thank you for providing feedback, for being awesome eCaST users, for sharing your thoughts and opinions, for struggling through eCaST in times where it's been a little bit buggy. So thank you for your dedication to the program. Thank you for using eCaST. Thank you for sharing your feedback now and in the past and in the future. So please feel very comfortable, confident talking to any of us about what you kind of wish we could do, and we always take that into consideration and do what we can here. So agenda today, we're going to discuss data entry problems that we've identified or that you've told us about, and we're going to show you some of our proposed solutions and see what you think. We're going to ask you what other problems we didn't cover with those proposed solutions. And then we're going to kind of discuss what a timeline and rollout plan for those sorts of changes might be. There's nothing happening soon, so just to kind of get that out of the way, we're not looking at changes in the next couple of months or anything. So this is really for you to be able to provide feedback before we make any changes about whether we're moving in the right direction or what the right direction is. Any questions or comments before we get started?
Star 6 to unmute.
Yep, star 6 to unmute. At the end, we will also cover any questions you have related to end-of-year data entry, so we will reserve some time for that in addition. So just to let you know, we'll also cover that during this meeting. Okie dokie. So, problems identified and proposed solutions. Also, sorry, backtrack. I can't see the chat box, so you have to speak up if you have questions over the phone, just because we only have one monitor. All we can see is the PowerPoint. So the first issue that you guys have told us about is that eCaST doesn't work so well on a small screen or on a square screen because it was developed by a developer whose screen is far too wide and fancy for his own good. So our first solution is refreshing eCaST with a focus on smaller, squarer monitors. And you've already seen some of those changes or improvements. So we've removed, like when there's something extra and fancy like the spinning graph bar on the home page on the right, we've been removing things on the right or the left of the screen, looking at ways to minimize, open and close those things so that you can get the most real estate out of your screen when it's smaller. One other thing that we've struggled with over time, and we've tried to maximize it as much as possible, but we have to really think about gutting the current technology we use and using a different kind as our table. So the clinical cycle summary screen, for example, can look a little wonky on a smaller screen. So we're going to be looking at just the technology that supports those and making them behave a little bit better on a smaller screen, but keeping the same information. The second problem identified is that the caution flags or errors are difficult to sort through or resolve. So we get questions sometimes. Sometimes this is a training issue, and sometimes it's that eCaST isn't working as effectively as it can. But this is it's just being difficult to find what errors should I be working on today, or how do I resolve the errors I do have in eCaST. So the first solution, and I'm going to show you some screenshots of this in a second, is a tile homepage that splits the flags into different categories. So you'll have different buckets of errors. So you'll have a bucket for your pending screenings, a bucket for your diagnostic workup needed cases, a bucket for administrative notices, so things that are on hold or things that aren't going to be paid, a bucket for true screening errors. So that's the one that's most needed, right? So that is your list of true, there's this technical inconsistency, I need to fix this little thing now. And then a bucket for procedure errors, which are kind of hard to find in and of themselves right now. You have to drill down into each screening. So those are the buckets. And one thing that we'll do, we know that each of these have different pieces of information that's relevant to them. So good example for diagnostic workup, you want to know how many days it's been open. So the table that lists the errors will have different relevant fields within them. So here's kind of an example screen. Again, this is a mock-up, so it'll look cleaner and better in the future. But we wanted to share with you this general idea that you would have these tiles on the top and they would have a different number associated with them, so your errors would fall into different categories or buckets of activities. So you could know the difference between your true data entry errors and those cases that are pending. That's probably the best example, is that right now your pending screenings get all mixed up into your data entry errors, and it can be hard to parse those two things out. So each of these will have separate lists associated with them. Those lists you'll have the capacity to be able to export the list into Excel as well. So I don't know if anybody, I want to make sure that I'm stopping every now and then and kind of getting your thoughts and feedback on each of these individual ideas. This is one I showed you a long time ago, but are there any thoughts to those? And I'm going to back up. Do those seem like the right buckets? Star 6 to unmute.
Yeah, those seem great. That's awesome.
Good.
Are there any errors that you can think of that don't seem to fit into any of those buckets?
And also to open it up a little bit, if anybody has any feedback on the first issue that we talked about as far as having a smaller monitor and what your view looks like.
Mm-hmm. What is cranky on a small monitor would be helpful.
Go back to the next
So
one. The next slide. Oh, it's awesome, actually.
And you'll see these surface later too. One of our other ideas is to continuously show you the errors in these different buckets once you get into the screening. So right now there's two that are green, but ideally they're different colors, and so you have almost like different beams within your screening. You know, I have one screening error. Yeah.
Always look for red.
All right. Any other kind of thoughts, ways to make this better, things you wish it had on it? Is this an improvement from having one giant list, or should we not do this?
This is Dee at Penrose. That looks good to me. I think that will be helpful.
Okay, good. And if you guys do, as we're providing this information, have other thoughts or want to shoot us an email, feel free. You can send an email to me, but I know that a lot of times you have Nick's information first and foremost, so feel free to shoot those to Nick with your kind of thoughts, ideas, especially as you're doing data entry over the next month, and know that we're thinking through this. So after you've heard this and kind of thought about it, and now as you're playing in eCaST, think, oh, I hadn't told Nick this yet, but this would be a helpful improvement.
And just to tack on to the previous thank you session, I want to thank you all for sending your feedback to date. A lot of the things that you've brought to my attention in the past have led to some of these solutions that we're working on here today.
I have a question about the different buckets. There won't be, like, let's say there's an error in case management and an error in data entry on the same client ID. They're not going to be in both buckets.
They will be in both buckets.
Okay.
So if you had somebody with a data entry issue and who was an open case management case, they would appear twice. Right now in the full list, they appear twice with 2 lines with each individual error.
Okay.
Does that sound like the right thing to do, to put them in both buckets?
I think so, but I would rather get, some feedback from agency members on if they also agree with that.
What do you guys think?
Remember, we can't see the chat.
This is Nikki at Peak Vista in Kiowa, and I think it sounds great.
Thanks, Nikki.
Awesome. Thank you. So we do have, let me see what I'm doing. Okay, so then kind of this is our next section. The third problem identified is that there's just too many clicks between the client lookup and the cancer screening page. So I think that this is probably the biggest concern or piece of feedback that we've received consistently over time, and that we haven't really been able to, we can make small fixes, but this is a really big fix. So how do we make fewer clicks in the system and save you time between looking a client up and getting in to add a procedure or change a screen information on a screening? So we have several solutions to this. I think 2 pages worth of solutions that we're proposing. So the first is to improve the client search, and that is to have an ability, if, for example, the client's ID is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, be able to navigate directly to it instead of having to search for them and then click on them, for example. And the second is to remove the screening summary page and instead add a lot of that functionality into a footer bar on the individual screening. So that sounds confusing, and that's why I'm going to show you a screenshot of what that one means. So the first, on the left of the screen, what you see right now, this is the traditional clinical cycle summary screen, but we've added on the left this menu bar that opens and closes. So you can close it and not have to see it. It doesn't take up any of your screen. You can open it, and so instead of having to go out to the home page to do a lot of these activities, you can stay within one client's screening, essentially, and navigate somewhere else or look up other information. So what we'll try to do is add a lot of this information that's in the clinical cycle summary screen onto the left bar so that you can see on the left at a glance before having to click to open a new page, which is some load time. So this is saving us time loading between clicks. To be able to essentially load all of this information on the left that you would traditionally go to here. It's also giving you the ability to add a new cycle from here and to see all the summary information. So, for example, and I just went back, you can now, from this, theoretically, click on the breast screening, whereas right now you have to click to open this and then click to open the screening. You'd be able to, from this bar, directly click on this breast cancer screening to open it directly in eCaST without having to do, so we've saved 1 or 2 clicks there, 1 or 2 page loads there. And then second at the bottom, now you see what I was describing as that footer page. So we have a number of different buttons that we're proposing adding into eCaST, and I'm going to go through each of those conceptually for you now. So first, you notice I've theoretically closed the menu bar. So it's like I clicked this menu thing and closed that, so you can see a fuller screen now. And then here, we'll have a refresh button. So right now you have to go back to the screening page to see what's refreshed. Instead, you can stay on this page and refresh what your errors are, what level it's calculating at. So these are all with the intention of eliminating the need for that screening summary page and adding the functionality in here. So this will allow you to refresh the page. This will have the same billing information as you're used to seeing currently. So you can click on this to see a summary of when this was paid. This was what I was talking about in terms of the errors and kind of bean counting. So we'll have one for each of those buckets I was describing in terms of errors. So you can see in this kind of crude example, I have one data entry error, and I have no case management or patient navigation issues or things to resolve. They're not in those buckets. So
Is it just on this case or on?
this is just for this case.
Okay, not like for everybody.
And so you would click on this in order to see a list of what those issues were. And then there's one bucket for each of these. And that just helps you, I think, to see, our intention here was to allow you to, at a glance, know more information about this case while you were on this page instead of having to leave it and come back to it in order to see that refreshed information.
So let me see if I can understand being a non-ECAST.
Good.
So I go in here and I see I have my one red error, data entry error, and so if I think I fixed it, then I refresh, and that one should go away.
Absolutely.
And if yay! And have a little party.
If it goes up, then you can click on it to see what your list of your 2 issues are. So you click on this thing to find out what issues they are.
Okay, well, that sounds great. I don't use it.
So then at the far right, this is really how you would navigate between screenings, again, in an effort to eliminate the full screening summary page. So for example, with cardiovascular, if you didn't already have a cardiovascular screening and you clicked on cardiovascular, it's going to give you enrollment options that you would then select to then add a cardiovascular screening from here. So you're never having to go back a page. You're going immediately out of one screening and into another. Conversely, if you've already started a cervical cancer screening and you want to pop into that directly from your breast cancer screening, you'll have some options here, and tell me what you think of these options. So right now, this hypothetical example has no procedures entered, but if it did, they would be listed here so you could see a summary of the date those procedures were performed. An ability to open the screening, so to go to that summary page, like this one that bounced between the breast and the cervical, or to directly add a procedure. So we have some of those buttons where you don't want to look at the medical history. You know what you need to do right now is click add procedures to add a pelvic exam. So you can, I think that that's one of the sources of many clicks is it takes a while to get to the add procedure button in particular. So that is the full gamut of this idea of this footer bar. I know that was a lot of information. I'm happy to do it a whole nother time, but what are your kind of broader thoughts about this?
Being recorded.
Yes.
So if you push just plus screening, are you going to add that?
So
that gave you that pop-up.
Yes, so theoretically I clicked the cervical button, and if I clicked add procedure, what this would do is it would shoot me to the like page where I would select pelvic or pap exam.
Oh, I'm talking about the ones at the bottom, plus the plus screening. That caused the whole thing.
Yes, that caused the whole thing to open.
So how do I add a mammogram?
I know. I thought of that. Yeah, that's a good question. I took it off my example. I covered the bar and forgot what was on it originally.
That's like the usual.
I think I probably needed to have breast here and have add procedure as well.
Well, isn't that
maybe that or down here.
Should be at the bottom.
Down here.
At the bottom.
It originally was. I covered it up.
It'll be there.
We should not put that down there. We should not forget that button. That is important.
No.
Yeah.
Maybe you could go by part and see if there's any feedback on each, like the refresh.
I'm going to go backwards.
Billing.
Point. Okay. So we're back here. Actually, I'm going to go back one to this menu thing. So this concept of the menu is to be able to search and load most of that clinical cycle summary information on a left bar. So theoretically, you can do this and look up another client from within this breast cancer screening to be able to then navigate to another client screening or to add another cycle or something like that. So,
or you can go straight to your cervical.
Go straight to the cervical from here as well.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot of multi-navigation options. What do you guys think about that left bar deal?
I like it.
Good.
Because it goes away. Click it.
Yes, so theoretically, yeah, you can click it and it goes away. So that is, again, us trying to take into consideration small square screens. That you can open this, oh, I did it the wrong way. You can open this and you can look for a new client, or you can close it if you want at any time. Any other pieces of feedback on that menu?
This also displays billing information. Looks like you have
Yeah, so I've got like the WWC B0, C0. I don't know if you would have to click on this to open the breast
data entry errors.
Yes. Well, I was trying to think through, I don't know how often you guys want to see or in what context you look for this thing, to click on it and look at the history of, it was paid $45 on January 15th. Does that need to be readily accessible here? Or is it okay that you would have to click this and then click this to see that?
That's a question.
Who does that? Yeah.
The question is, do you want the date of payment on that menu bar, or is it okay if you have to click to go get that?
Okay to click.
Okay. And that is, I don't think that that's a very common thing. You're not like doing it a ton as much as you do data entry. Think about that. Are there other people who are like, no, I do that a lot. That's part of my process, and that would be a lot of work. Okay. Somebody has modem. I just heard it.
Oh, that's weird.
Did you hear that? Someone has AOL. Okay, so then the refresh button, so those are the other two. So having this refresh button, so the ability to see refreshed errors, refreshed billing on the screening instead of having to go out and back into the screening. I'm guessing that's a win-win for everybody.
Anybody not like that?
So long as we have the add procedure button for the mammogram.
Yeah, really. We have to add our mammogram.
Yeah. And then this literally would have the same information it has in the past. It would be the exact same pop-up in terms of billing history. So any other pieces or thoughts about those two things or how to make billing history look better?
This is a billing history. This is more of that whole, so you're getting rid of that whole screening table, multi-year screening table, but is that available somewhere?
So we would be leaving this screen.
Oh, okay.
We would be getting rid of the screen in between this and the screening.
Got it. So, yeah.
And long term, I don't know. I would love your feedback on long term if you ever end up using this anymore, because theoretically, all that information will be here as well.
Oh,
so hypothetically, we're replacing. Hypothetically, we're replacing it with this, but I don't see the harm in leaving this one. Like, so in many ways, the rollout plan is to leave both of these features or ways of doing data entry as options until you tell us, hey, we don't ever use that other way of doing things anymore. So you could basically bypass this screen and the screenings summary screen altogether. And what we'll look for long term is information about you from actually the thing you built, we don't use it because the other thing is better, or if you added this extra feature to it, I would stop using the old way, those sorts of things. So we're trying to be very intentional about giving you more ways of doing things rather than taking pieces away. They'll still exist. I'm just guessing you won't use them. And maybe that will be long-term a nice printout kind of thing. But that will still definitely be accessible.
One thing I'm wondering is that when the good folks out there email me an issue, they tend to send me the screening or the client ID number, the cycle number, but then also the screening ID number.
I can't see that here.
I'm wondering where would we display that? I think it's
maybe we should add that to the top where it says breast screening and diagnostics.
With the cycle and then the screening ID.
Something like that.
That's the table you're getting rid of.
So that's how they can like reference the screening ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and also probably here. So here it has cycle ID.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to put screening ID in there.
What do you guys think? Well, I guess you need it.
They're saying they tell him, they communicate with him that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, folks are very good about sending cycle ID numbers and screening ID numbers.
Now, one thing I didn't have time to prepare for this call is improvements to when you're adding a new screening. So versus going into an existing one or adding another screening from an existing clinical cycle. So that page for adding a new clinical cycle, very likely it'll be a full page rather than a pop-up, and so that will give us the ability to give you, I think, a little easier time in terms of the enrollment information. So basically in that office is it pop up asking you for information about the first screening you want to add and what enrollment it's tied to, so you don't have that middle page. And I might send out screenshots or something later or ask for your feedback on that, because I just didn't have time to prepare that one, but it's missing from today's
I think that would be a good idea. I think it's hard to picture sometimes.
I know, it really is.
Screenshots and post them somewhere.
Yeah.
And have people comment. It would be very helpful.
Okay. So then, do you guys like this idea of the buckets being here, or is having just one button for all of them fine, and the buckets are great on the home page but unnecessary on this page? What do you guys think? Or is it too conceptual?
This is Nikki in Kiowa. I think on the home page, because then it would stand out and maybe a less chance for falling through the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to take it up to homepage.
She's suggesting both places. She's wondering if you also want it here.
Does it make sense here, or is it overkill here?
I'm okay with it in both places.
Yeah, but the boy is going back and forth.
Yeah.
Now, here's a question, Kristen. Will there be a way to make that bar disappear? Kind of like how you can make your toolbar, like for people who want to see more on their screen. You know, a little arrow that kind of drops the bar down. So
I think that's a good question. So I can talk with our developer about that. The other thing I hadn't thought to mention yet, but is important, is that this screen has a lot of extra white space, and that's one of the things we'll work on eliminating. So, for example, this follow-up table has follow-up and follow-up for one line. So instead of that, it's going to literally have the one field that says follow-up,
yeah,
which is going to eliminate about an inch worth of wasted space on your monitor. So I'm hoping that we can clear a lot of this out, and it's going to make this feel more useful and this not feel like it's taking up too much space. But I wonder, I can ask our developer, this can be one of those things where when you hover over it, it appears, and when you go away from it, it disappears, that sort of thing.
Kind of like our new comments.
Yes.
which I like.
You can demo that maybe a little bit. The notes section is a little different, is what Angie and Nick are referring to. It works a bit better than it used to. This note section in the corner here. It behaves better. So do people have ideas about this thing? Or thoughts or feedback? Chris McCracken does.
What if they have 20 enrollments? Should that be maybe sorted by most recent at the bottom, or I don't know. You know,
that is a good question. I haven't thought through if you get a person that's got like 15 of them, how paging would work with this.
Yeah.
So for the one that we currently have, and this is just a general comment, that our tables that we use in eCaST, I mentioned this earlier, tables kind of misbehave.
Yeah.
And they're as good as they get for the current technology, but we need to switch the technology, and that's the point, is that it's not good enough technology for what we need it to do in eCaST. And so that is one activity as part of these larger changes, is making those tables behave better. So certainly one piece of feedback long-term we've received is that the enrollment list can be unruly if you have multiple. It doesn't behave well if you have more than 5, let's say, max. Probably 3 if you have a really small screen.
Mm-hmm.
I think the large issue with the enrollment table currently in eCaST is that if you have a large volume of enrollments, it can potentially hide your add a new screening button depending on the size of your screen, which is something we are definitely looking into and trying to figure out solutions for it. But as Kristen said, the tables are kind of at their best current function.
And so the intention is to change to a better technology, is the end result. So there are a couple of these things where we've got them as good as they can be without basically taking a lot of time, which we're going to do, to change that technology that underlies them. The pop-ups and the tables are 2 examples of that. So the paging issue, though, is a good point. So what do you do? We need to really think through what do we do for the person that has 15 enrollments.
Right.
Making that useful. Are there other kind of things to look out for, current problems you have that you want to make sure we...
You haven't really asked them if they like that.
Do you like the plus screening thing at the bottom?
Or does anyone
dislike the plus?
Sorry.
You are free to dislike it.
You are. Please, yeah, tell us.
Indifferent.
We're neutral.
I hear no nays. Please speak up if you think something will be cumbersome or, because we have great ideas sometimes, but based on past experience, it's like, oh, you should do it this way, and the people are like, oh my God, that's so cumbersome to do it that way. So, but hopefully this is resolving some of this.
I think if it just shows the current enrollment, it's fine, but if it's going to get bulked up and bogged down by showing 20 different enrollments, then it's going to be kind of a pain in the neck.
So I wonder then if it should have add new and should list the current and then say not this one, and then it would take you to another place where you could have more room on your screen to select from multiple. Is that a good, what do people think about that idea?
Especially if colorectal is going to have more than one. I mean, here's my that other.
Also, colorectal should only show, we shouldn't show colorectal enrollment for cardiovascular.
Okay, got it.
But that, I mean, that's a good point. Like, we need to limit that here. What do you guys think about that idea, though, of having multiple enrollments but not too many here, or only showing the most recent, the one that the breast was tied to, theoretically, for example, and then the ability to, as an easy way out of saying, not this one, and then you would have to go, you know what I mean, get a larger list. But I would think 99.9% of the time, if you've already added a breast screening, you're going to add to the exact same enrollment for your cervical.
Can you do a drop-down?
I think just the most current, but that's me personally.
This is Ellen from the outreach. I think the most current as well would be perfect.
Okay. So then I think that's how we'll design this, is most current and then a way out if for whatever reason it's not what you want to do that day. And the way out would be a different screen where you'd have more options. Thank you. That's great. That's a great suggestion. So here's the other example. So cardio, that was an example of nothing exists already, but cervical, in this example, cervical already exists, and this is your way of toggling to the cervical cancer screening. One button I think is missing here if you have diagnostics is adding diagnostics. The no procedures entered thing would instead say something like 1/1/2015 pelvic, 1/1/2015 PAP.
7/13/15 CVE, I believe it's currently listed.
So this would kind of give you a summary of what those procedures were before you opened it, so you kind of have at a quick glance what you might want to add as a procedure. But what are your ideas for this one?
Another one.
You also can't quickly see the errors. That might be another point. I would have to click on the open screening to see the jelly beans for cervical. Instead of knowing, I probably should list here, maybe beside the word cervical, or up here that it's set to a C0 right now, so you know it's not paid yet. Is that helpful?
I just think it's time for them. First one. Is the billing level helpful here? Adding the billing level to the screening pop-up, whatever it is.
So you're saying that, so like what it shows now is like, you know, at a level 2, 3, whatever it is, it's still going to show that, right?
So right here, just in this drop-down piece, should it show the billing for cervical? Because right now when we look at this whole screen, I can't tell that cervical is a C0, but I know that for the sample case.
She's in breast. So
Yeah.
should she have something that comes up that tells her what
cervical going is on? What's going on in cervical?
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to go to really quickly? So when you're like, I'm knee deep in A and I want to be knee deep in B, what are those like 2 places where, for example, you're having to make 5 clicks to get between them? That's really what we're trying to eliminate, clicks.
I wonder, and not being a user, but if I'm entering breast, I would go, I already entered this on a different screening. And is there an easy way to check that without going 12 out and 12 back in?
You would click the down arrow on the menu, and you would see your complete. Okay.
Because that's where I think
the dates of the procedure.
I could see doing that. Like, wait, I feel like I entered this.
Yeah.
Also, I just noticed the left thing needs to have the agency name on it for each cycle, so you know it was your agency or somebody else's agency.
And I think that's where that big table can be useful as the client goes from one to another and see what was done.
So continue to think about this, particularly think about when you're making lots of clicks.
If you come across a click and you hate it, please let me know. Shoot me an email. We really want to hear from you about it.
I think the other place that you guys make a lot of clicks, and tell me if you are not bothered by this, please, and then we won't have further discussion about it internally.
Can you go out to the thing and we'll track attendance while you're talking about it?
Is that you're often clicking opening and closing those accordion pieces?
Yeah.
And so having more of those where the information's just there instead of having to open and close the accordion pieces, does that sound, I heard a yes, does that sound like a good place to focus our next discussion internally?
Yes, that would be nice.
Okay.
I would also agree with that.
Okay. I'm about to have to go to the car.
Oh, okay.
So be thinking of that. It doesn't have to be anything that I showed today. Any part of eCaST where you're making lots of clicks and you want us to focus time, resources on thinking through how to make that work better. That's really what we want you to do. So a few other things. So I've already mentioned the solution number 2 of homepage features being accessible basically to that drop-down menu on the left. So instead of having to go to the homepage, which takes a while to load, have those things be accessible on the left instead. Solution 3 is better routing to the error source, and that's sort of done to those jelly beans at the bottom. Solution 4, display and refresh flags, including the category. So again, that's having that refresh button showing you billing information there and the type of error. And then solution 5 is advanced training options. So that was one piece of feedback or suggestion you guys had for us in May was that I think you liked the advanced training we used to offer, or you didn't know about that and thought of it all on your own again. But I think a couple people had mentioned that, and so I think we had a couple of specific questions for this group related to next steps for an advanced training structure.
Yeah, there were a couple of things that have been mentioned as far as feedback. One was that when and if you're working on an error and you click on the error to get to that section that you're going to do the fix, you may potentially have an automatic pop-up of some guidance as to how to resolve that error. Some advanced training specifics that we were talking about was going to be referring folks in for diagnostics or specific clinical items that need review from Angie and how to do those in eCaST before you ask and then after you get the green light from Angie. So we're talking about putting together a regimen of kind of more detailed instruction for some of the more advanced cases that we have in eCaST.
So one question I think we had for the group was, does the YouTube video format seem like the best format for offering those? So developing an advanced level, a set of advanced level videos that you could watch sound like the best format for advanced training, or would having some of those technical assistance calls that are every other month calling those out as specifically for people to bring or listen in to discussion on advanced topics, and so that would be more of an interactive option. How do those two ideas resonate with you? Does one sound better than the other?
So the question, folks, is for an advanced training, would you like a set of dedicated training video materials or an interactive web TA session, or both? We'll leave it to you.
I can't get YouTube at work, so that's a problem for me. This is Evie.
Evie, are you able to are you able to download the videos from the WWC provider site? We have a folder so that you should be able to view them there.
Okay.
Maybe that's something that Nick can work with you one-on-one.
Yeah,
we do have a second option for non-YouTube people who can't use that at work.
Okay, I haven't had to do that, but I'm glad that that's available.
Okay, great.
So when you're talking about the interactive piece of it, is that something similar to when you first implemented eCaST? We had that little practice session piece that we could get in and play with?
Yes, I think.
If you wanted it to be.
We do have a training site where you can go in and play around to your heart's desire. Well, that's available to anybody at any time, and we can share that login information. It's generic login information. We currently have on the off months, so the months where we don't have the eCaST users group, we have a technical assistance call that Nick hosts that's up to 2 hours long, I believe, where it really fields your questions, but I know that it's been in the past a little more focused towards newer users, and so we were wondering if we took some of those and re-geared them or focused them on specific advanced user topics, if having a webinar format where we're having a discussion rather than, or in addition to videos, would be helpful.
I like that.
Who would attend those? I mean, would people attend those if we did that, or would you be more likely to watch the videos?
This is Dia Penrose, and I would probably be more apt to attend one of those webinar, one of the phone things. So, because going on, we can't get YouTube here either. But trying to watch a video, I don't have the time to do that mostly.
Okay. Anybody
else?
I
don't have much time either. This is Nikki and Kiowa.
I think the interactive classes are easier to learn with than just watching a video since it's one learning medium. And also I find it hard when I look up the YouTube videos to sort through and find the one that I'm looking for that I need, and I spend a lot of time searching for the one that's going to tell me the answer.
That's actually a really great point, and something I didn't touch on here, but I wonder if we should make a higher priority. So we've had on our list of ideas or to-dos to embed the YouTube videos into eCaST. So when you're on a page and you get a certain kind of error, you see the videos that are available related to that page. Does that sound like that's a high priority activity for you guys, for us to invest time in developing that component of eCaST?
May I ask the current folks that are banned from using YouTube, would it be allowable through eCaST to view those videos? Not sure.
I think that sounds
Sorry, what did you say?
I think that sounds awesome if that could happen.
Okay.
Nick,
and that one, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Nick, this is Dee again, and I just, the quick reference guide that you put out was actually very helpful for me because I have it where I can get to it fairly quickly. So that's more helpful.
Do you think it'd be helpful to embed that into the application, Dee?
I'm sorry?
But would it be helpful if that lived in eCaST, where you could just click on it on a toolbar?
I think that would be great, actually. Because it's hard to, like the last person said, it's hard to have the time to go through and find out which video it is, what to look for. So if it was right on eCaST, that would be so much easier.
All right.
That's kind of a big picture question, and I don't know if anybody has a sense of this, but do you have a sense of whether we should, and we can do both, but we should invest more of our time in making changes to eCaST to resolve specific pieces of feedback, or more of our time trying to embed these kind of interactive technical assistance pieces into eCaST so that you feel as confident as possible with the system as it currently is interacting with it? That idea of changes sound daunting, and you'd rather just become an expert in how it is today.
This is Ruth from Tri-County. I'd like you to spend your time, more of your time making it more efficient for us to navigate through it.
Okay.
And just a suggestion, if you're going to embed, if you have just a search bar where we could put a few words in, and then it would go to the video directly that we would need. That's just an idea to make it a little bit more efficient too.
Good suggestion. Is anybody else do you guys agree with Ruth that it makes the most sense to focus on these things we've proposed today, and still ultimately have that goal of the training and technical assistance being embedded in, but I want to see what others think about that.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can reorganize the YouTube videos as they currently sit so they're a lot more user-friendly as far as finding the one that you need for the issue that you're working on. We're also aware of the fact that those videos are a little stale, they're a little old, they need to be refreshed, and maybe made a little more efficient as far as use of time goes, so that you guys have said that time is definitely not available. So we are planning on revamping some of those materials, and I think in doing so we can recategorize them so they're easier to find for you.
So I've got on the screen here the last problem identified that we have a thought through a solution for, and that is, and I've already mentioned this, unresolved issues with the eCaST pop-ups. So the pop-ups lack some things that we wish they had. So the enrollment pop-up is a little cranky. It's hard to see the add screenings button all the time. Default or required fields don't always appear as required and stuff like that. So essentially what we're asking the system to do is exceeding the ability or capability of the pop-up, which means we need to move to a different technology for the pop-up. So there's nothing to really show you here other than to say we recognize the pop-ups are cranky, and I think that for the most part we know why it's cranky. It's just that we need to find a new technology to make it behave a little bit better. So that was the last kind of general area that we wanted to say we're trying to formally address those pop-ups being a little cranky. You won't see changed functionality other than that they should behave better and be a little easier to use and more intuitive. So what else? What other things that you're like, well, I can't believe you didn't mention that. What are those things? And I'm going back to this thing so that we can get roll. All right, go ahead to the roll. What else, guys?
I wish I could delete my own cycles.
Okay. We'll put that on a list. I can't remember. I think that it should be fine to give you the ability to delete empty cycles. I get more nervous about deleting cycles that have stuff in them. Though I get what you're saying. You're like, if I know I'm not going to ever get paid for this, how do I officially get that deleted and taken off my error list? So,
yeah, I just feel like I spend a lot of time being like, oops, Nick!
Yeah, I hear you.
And Kristen speaks to a good point. It's 99% of the time when you send me something that needs to be taken out of eCaST, you're absolutely spot on. It's not going to be paid out, or we have a known duplicate. But from time to time, we do run into something that already has billing attached to it, or something that you may not be aware that it could receive billing if we just approached it the right way. So there is a reason that we do a little gatekeeping on the deleting, but I think in certain instances it makes a lot of sense.
We could provide maybe the option to delete a clinical cycle or a screening when it doesn't have billing associated with it, and they could just tell you, I can't delete this because it's got billing. And then you'd be missing that part, the second part of what Nick said of sometimes it's a data entry issue and it really is payable if you work with Nick through it a little bit, but maybe that is still something that we should do. I think that's a good suggestion. What other things do you wish you could do?
This is Ellen from the Outreach, Spanish Speaks Outreach. I think what I've had issues with is we've had some women who've had a large number of enrollments, and I can't get to the very bottom to click the green button to, select the one that I need. So I end up having to go into my settings and minimize my screen in eCaST just on so I can get to that green button, and then I just enlarge it again.
Yes, yeah, that's definitely we need to fix, and is worth saying because that would drive me crazy, and we need to fix that.
Yeah, and one of the fixes we have for that, it's an elegant but effective, is holding down your control button and hitting the minus key, which causes your settings to shrink down so the button becomes very tiny but viewable. You can't click on it.
Right. That's kind of what I have to do. I just do it manually.
Right.
I mean, I didn't know about that little shortcut, but
What was that?
Basically what I'm now looking at the enrollment.
I definitely understand now. It's frustrating, particularly when you get into one, you look at it, it has 20 enrollments, so you know that it's not going to show up on the bottom. But if you hold down control and hit minus a couple of times, it'll change your screen settings, so it'll shrink down the resolution on it. You'll be able to see the button, small as it may be.
How do you do the opposite when you're done?
To bring it back, you hit control and then hit plus. It'll bring it back to your regular settings.
Thank you.
I'm using that now.
Even though she doesn't have a computer in front of her.
No. I'm going to go do it.
From now on.
Click on it. So what else, guys? Those two good ones.
This is Ruth from Tri-County. I was wondering when you time out, if we could automatically go to the sign-in page, because right now you think that you might still be in, and you start typing some stuff, and you realize when it just sort of freezes, oh, I've got to go sign back in. So I was wondering if we could automatically go to the sign-in page.
That's a good one we hadn't mentioned today. Let me harass our developer more about that. He knows about that issue and fixes it in some places, but I get the sense he has to fix it manually everywhere in the system, and that's why it's weird. But I think it's good to know that you guys are driven as nuts by it as we are internally. And so we'll certainly bring that back to him and say, hey, if there is a bigger solution to this, please do it, because it is irritating.
Thank you.
All right, and so we only have a couple of minutes left.
I think the one other thing that I get from folks is when and if you're locked out of the system, you have to email me and get an email back from me. I think being able to reset your own password is something we are considering near to long term, but making that more efficient as well.
That's a system-wide issue, unfortunately.
Yeah, that one's one that encompasses all the applications we work on, so it's a little bigger than singularly eCaST, but we are aware of it.
So please email either me or Nick additional thoughts now that you hear that we're really trying very genuinely to prioritize and to organize these into meaningful changes in eCaST. Please email us your additional ideas and thoughts. And
really, if you want to vent, if you want to rant, please send me that email.
We'll just send it right to our developers.
Yes. Very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to do that. I did want to talk about timeline really quickly, just to give you a heads up that the absolute soonest we would release, there's 2 times we would potentially release this. The soonest, and it depends on the changes, would be in December. That's to give you at least a month and a half or two to get used to any sort of changes we release before you have to get your data in for the February GFDL or grant fund change letter round of budget changes. And then we would hold off, if we didn't implement changes in December, we would hold off until April or so to make sure that you have adequate time for data entry in January and February, adequate time and support for the data entry cleanup project in preparation for the CDC data submission in March or so. So we're not looking at doing this in the next, it's going to take several months to make those changes, and we want to be cognizant of the high data entry times and not to release during times when we know you're mad dashing to get something in, or that we're asking a lot of you. So maybe December or maybe in April are the two times that we're thinking about. And as I mentioned earlier, as much as possible, we would be creating options for you to use both old and new features. So the home pages may be a good example, where we'll give you the option of choosing the new or the old home page, either the tiles or no tiles, until we feel like every kink has been worked out. Nobody's really using the old one anymore. Everybody feels like the new one is better, all those sorts of things. So as much as possible, we're going to give you both options when we do release changes. Yeah. So I think we're going to have to skip to roll call now that it's 3:30. I want to be cognizant of your guys' time. Please do stay on the line if you have end-of-year data entry cleanup questions and have time to do that. Otherwise, just get in touch with Nick directly if you haven't done so already. Remember, the data entry deadline is next Thursday, 7:30. So I'm going to call out the name of agency.
Wait, let everybody sign up.
Oh, yeah.
We've gotten all the ones in the chat, and then we'll go through who we don't have.
Thank you.
Thank you.